Hello, I've been meaning to talk about Blue Origin for a while and talk about some of the dysfunction I've seen in the company and maybe some explanation of what we're seeing from the outside, but I didn't really have a good way to do it. I thought about comparing them to SpaceX, but the kind of level of what SpaceX has done and the level of what Blue Origin has done would make that largely an unexcited comparison. And then a week or so ago, there was an interesting announcement out of Rocket Lab. And I've decided that I'm going to use Rocket Lab as a comparison and explain why I think Blue Origin is not going to be successful at what they're going to do and why Rocket Lab probably is going to be successful. And partly I've done this just because I like expressing a contrary opinion, and I guess because I'm excited about what Rocket Lab is planning. So my perspective of this is kind of looking at the businesses from an investment perspective. If I was looking at these two businesses and what they were proposing, would I be interested in investing in one of them over the other? So let's get going. To start, I need to talk about kind of where each of the companies are in terms of expertise, and then what they are planning to do next. So I'm going to start with Blue Origin. Blue Origin currently flies the New Shepard spacecraft. It's a suborbital vehicle. It's a single stage. Payload, the actual payload amount is unknown. I looked, I couldn't find anything published, and you have to kind of ask for permission to see their user's guide. They do launch a capsule, and the capsule is probably a few tons. It's 18 meters. It's 4.5 meters in diameter. At least this version is. There might be a wider one now. It's flown 14 flights, and it's had one failure. Now, looking at Rocket Lab, their current operating vehicle is a launcher called Neutron. This is a small lift vehicle, two-stage, 30 kilograms to low Earth orbit. That's what makes it a small lift vehicle. 17 meters long, only 1.2 meters in diameter. And they've flown 19 flights, kind of 2 failures. So that contextually kind of shows us the level of expertise, the current level of expertise in each of these companies, at least when it comes to actually operating launch systems. So now let's look at the projects they're proposing. Rocket Lab has proposed this new launcher called Neutron. It's a medium lift vehicle, so one step up from a small lift. Two-stage, 8 tons to low Earth orbit is what they're shooting for. 40 meters tall, 4.5 meters in diameter. So much taller, much bigger around than Neutron. And they're planning on going with first stage landing, propulsive landing like SpaceX has done. Over on Blue Origin side, we have New Glenn. And I'll note I've tried to make these all correct in terms of scale. They're pretty close. So New Glenn, it's a heavy lift vehicle. So suborbital, small lift, medium lift, heavy lift. So that would be three steps up. Two-stage, 45 tons to low Earth orbit. If you're looking for comparison, roughly similar to Falcon Heavy. 98 meters tall, 7 meters in diameter. It's a very big rocket. And also doing first stage landing. So that lets you kind of understand what each company has done and what they are trying to do with their next project. So let's dig into some more comparisons. One of the things I thought would be interesting to talk about first is the relative project difficulty. So Blue Origin is building their first two-stage rocket. Rocket Lab, this will be their second two-stage rocket. Okay, obviously easier to build first stage, your second one, than it is to build your first one. So I'm going to say Rocket Lab has it easier. This is Blue Origin's first orbital rocket, second orbital rocket for Rocket Lab. Once again, second one's going to be easier. Blue Origin is trying to go from a suborbital rocket to a heavy lift rocket. That's moving up 3 classes all at once. Rocket Lab is moving up 1 class, small lift to medium lift. Also the easier difficulty. Blue Origin, this will be their second propulsive landing booster. So New Shepard comes down and lands propulsively, so they have experience doing that in the past. Rocket Lab, this will be their first propulsive landing booster. So I'm going to give the advantage to Blue Origin. It's really not quite that clear cut, because Blue Origin, when they bring back their booster, they start with a booster that's essentially almost stopped at about 100 kilometers up. So they come back and they propulsively land, but they really don't have to deal with re-entry. Rocket Lab has recently been working on reusing the first stage from Electron, which means they have to bring it back and do re-entry. So Rocket Lab knows the re-entry part better than Blue Origin. Blue Origin knows the propulsive landing part better. So I'm still going to give the advantage to Blue Origin, but I don't think it's quite that clear cut. So project difficulty, I think it's pretty clear that given what Rocket Lab has done, Neutron is a much smaller step for them than going from New Shepard to New Glenn is for Blue Origin. Leadership. Okay, so who's in charge? Rocket Lab is run by Peter Beck. Blue Origin is run by Jeff Bezos. So I think most people are going to say that the advantage goes to Jeff Bezos with all of the Amazon experience. Vision and alignment. Well, this is an interesting one. One of the things I use to evaluate companies is I look at what they say their business is, what they're trying to accomplish, what their vision is, versus what they are actually doing in their projects. So, what does Blue Origin say? And I'm going to read these because they might be hard to see on the video. Building a road. We're committed to building a road to space so our children can build the future. Rocket Lab says, we open access to space to improve life on Earth. And there's a lot of synergy between those two. They're very similar. And both of those, I think, are pretty good vision statements. They're short, and I think they're pretty easy to understand. So that's good. So let's look at the projects that each company is doing. So Rocket Lab, I already said their existing launcher is Electron. They say dedicated access to space for small satellites. Okay, that seems totally in line with what they're doing. They also have this project called Photon, and Photon really shows up in different forms. Sometimes it's just a kick stage. Sometimes it's what we would call a satellite bus. So a full kind of turnkey solution so that their customers who want to have a satellite in space but don't want to design the full satellite, they can just design the sensor platform or whatever they care about and put it on top of Photon. And Photon essentially handles everything else. So think of this as a one-stop shop for companies that want to launch small satellites. So that clearly opens access, and that's a good thing, and it's aligned with what they're trying to do. New one, Neutron, the Mega Constellation Launcher. So their goal is to be able to launch a lot of Mega Constellation satellites. Now, we can argue whether or not that improves life on Earth, and I'm not sure that's clear yet, but it certainly does open access to space. So looking at what Rocket Lab is doing, they kind of have these three things. They are all carefully aligned with what their vision is. Okay, so I would say looking at Rocket Lab, I think they are a well-aligned company. Their vision and their projects align. Let's look at Blue Origin. Okay, so I already talked about New Glenn. They say our really big step, an orbital reusable launch vehicle that will build the road to space. Okay, you read what they're saying there, you read what they say in their vision, that looks very well aligned. Looks great. Next, New Shepard. Our reusable launch vehicle is taking payloads, and soon you, to space. So before I talk about alignment with this, I have a bit of a bone to pick with what they've done here. And the problem I have is in their vision, when they say building a road to space, they're really talking about getting to orbit. And in New Glenn, when they talk about road to space, they're really talking about getting to orbit. New Shepard doesn't get you to orbit. So when they talk about getting to space, what they mean is different than what they mean when they're talking about building a road. So that, for me, means that this is not a well-aligned activity. Now, you can make an argument that New Shepard was a great thing to do first, that we would do New Shepard before New Glenn, kind of a stepping stone approach. We're going to go suborbital, then we're going to do an orbital thing, and I totally agree with that. But their plan currently is to operate New Shepard both as a suborbital payload rocket and as a suborbital tourism rocket. And my argument would be that neither of those activities are aligned with building a road to space or building a road to orbit. Blue Moon. Blue Moon is a flexible lander delivering a wide variety of small, medium, and large payloads to the lunar surface. Whether cargo or crew, its capability to provide precise and soft landings will enable a sustained human presence on the moon. And this is a bid for NASA's human lander system as part of the Artemis project. I'm having a hard time fitting in what they are doing here with the part about building a road to space. Because I think building a road to space is all about getting to orbit, and this is about competing for a NASA project that's kind of focused on getting from lunar orbit down to the moon. Now, you can make an argument that that is part of building a road. I don't think it's a very good argument. You can also make an argument that the money they would get for this would help them build a road. And I kind of might agree with that. But if I'm looking purely from an alignment perspective, I don't think this is aligned with building a road. And then finally, the fourth project that they list is rocket engines designed for reuse. And I think building rocket engines is a good activity for Blue Origin. I didn't talk about this, but Electron built their own rocket engine. Obviously, SpaceX builds their own rocket engines. Blue Origin was already building rocket engines for New Shepard, and I think if you want to do reuse, it really helps if you build your own engines. So I can see how this fits into we're doing this for New Glenn. The strange part about this is the engine they built for New Glenn, the BE-4, is first going to be used in ULA's Vulcan rocket. And to me, that's kind of a strange thing to do. That to me does not look aligned. It doesn't look aligned because, okay, we're spending time selling this to other people. How does that help us do New Glenn? And I'm not convinced it is. And the other weird thing is that ULA's Vulcan is somewhat of a competitor for New Glenn. And because Vulcan is a simple design and New Glenn is a fairly complex design, and because ULA has a lot of experience with orbital rockets, Vulcan is going to fly quite a bit sooner than New Glenn will. So I'm kind of confused as to why they would do this from a vision and alignment sort of perspective. It just doesn't make sense to me from a business perspective. So, looking at the Blue Origin side, I see one that's well aligned, New Glenn. New Shepard would have been aligned in the past, but I don't think it's aligned anymore. And then the other two just sort of confuse me. I don't understand why they are in that business, given what they say they want to do. Okay, so you're not surprised. I think Rocket Lab has an advantage here. What they're doing is more aligned, and I think it's simpler. I expect that Blue Origin has considerable internal kind of competition or strife between who gets the focus on what the company's doing. Because New Glenn and Blue Moon and the rockets, all of these can consume resources. And I don't know how you decide which ones get which. So motto. So I usually wouldn't talk about mottos, but in this case, I'm going to make an exception. So Blue Origin has not only a motto, they have a coat of arms. And their motto in Latin is graditim or graditim ferociter. Sorry, I never took Latin. Which is roughly translated usually step by step ferociously. Now, first of all, I think having a Latin motto is a bit pretentious, especially if you're a relatively recent company. If you're someone like the Marine Corps who has a Latin motto, I think that's a great thing, and I actually think their motto is very good because it aligns well with what they want to do. But in this case, it just looks pretentious. So, but pretentious is fine. The real problem I have here is I don't understand what this motto is supposed to mean. And Jeff Bezos has been asked about it. What does this motto mean? If you're building a flying vehicle, you can't cut any corners. If you do, it's going to be just an illusion that it's going to make it faster. You have to do it step by step, but you want to do it ferociously. Now, my first comment is that if your company motto needs to be explained in 2 or 3 sentences, it's probably not a very good motto. My second comment is I don't know how to do something ferociously. I don't know what that means. I know how to do something step by step, and okay, that seems like a good thing, but I don't know how to do it ferociously. So I don't know how this motto helps you. I also feel that I have to point out that step by step ferociously seems totally at odds with what Blue Origin decided to do around New Glenn. Going from a suborbital launcher all the way to a heavy lift launcher does not look like step by step to me. That looks like a big jump all at once. So on the Rocket Lab side, as far as I can tell, Rocket Lab doesn't really have an official motto. I pulled something off of the Neutron announcement video, which is when we say we're going to do something at Rocket Lab, we do it. And I actually don't know how true this is. And in some sense, I think it's kind of a bad motto because being stuck on something and when it's a bad idea is really not a great thing to do. But as mottos go, that might be okay. So you're probably not surprised that I'm going to choose lack of motto or something very simple over what Blue Origin has done. Operational experience. And at this, I'm trying to look at what experience does the company have and how can they apply that experience to their next project. So Rocket Lab 2018 through 2020, they have a growing launch rate for Electron. They have orbital launch experience. What do we have on Blue Origin? Well, we have 3 flights in 2019, which looked like a lot, and then they only flew once in 2020. And I guess we could say that might be COVID related, or there might be something else going on. Suborbital launch only. Okay, that one's pretty obvious. Fiscal efficiency. This is an interesting one. Rocket Lab developed Electron without large monetary resources. Okay. I'm kind of cheating when I say this because Rocket Lab did have infusions of investment cash at a couple points, and I actually haven't gone and looked to see what the exact amounts are. But I'm going to assert at least that they're smaller than Blue Origin. They've taken what I call a low cost or an incremental approach. You know, they're going to build up Electron, get cash out of that, and use that to drive Neutron. And so far they have 3 years of commercial launches. They have cash flow, which means people are paying them to actually launch. And I'm going to assume that they have operational profit. Now, they may not have profit for the company as a whole. I'm going to assume that the operational profit that's coming in is using to expand and to do Neutron design. But that's something that I want to see. I want to see a company that knows how to make a product that customers are actually interested in paying cash for and do it on an ongoing basis. That's, I guess, one of the base things I look for. Blue Origin. Well, Blue Origin also obviously has large resources. But something that really surprises me is they've made this large pre-investment in infrastructure. They built in Florida a large rocket factory. They built a large launch pad. And they've also built a rocket engine plant as well. And this is really confusing to me from a fiscal efficiency standpoint. Because generally what you want to do is you want to conserve your cash as much as you can. And you want to do things as incrementally as you can. Partly because cash you've spent you can never get back, obviously. And partly because a lot of times you figure things out along the way. They built this very large rocket factory and very large launch pad. Now, obviously, with the size of rocket they've chosen, maybe they need both of these. But the problem with the factory is they actually don't know if it's the right size. Is it the right size? Do they need a factory that's 25% that size, or do they need a factory that's 3 times that size? Well, they don't actually know, and they've kind of speculatively put a lot of money into this. And the reason I don't like this is people who build, or companies that do a lot of pre-investment, to me it looks like they're doing something because they can't figure out what the right thing to do is, or they can't figure out how to do this incrementally. And that's kind of a danger sign for me. Now, part of this may be just because they chose such a large launcher and they aren't able to use existing facilities. You know, you're not going to be able to build something as large as New Glenn needs to be built either very near the launch site, or you have to barge things around. And that's pretty complicated. And you need a large launch pad. Now, maybe they could have used pad 39B, which is open for commercial launch, but they chose not to, or maybe there was a really good reason why not to. But this really is sort of behavior that really makes me both confused and a little worried from an investment standpoint. No history of fiscal efficiency. So on some of the new Shepard flights, they presumably got paid for their payloads. Okay, that's a good thing. But for the most part, the company has just run purely on investment money the whole time that it's existed. And because of that, no history of profitability or really ongoing cash flow. Okay. The real point about this is companies that are used to having to worry about cash flow and monetary resources and how long can we keep the lights on and those sort of things tend to do better from an efficiency and from a profit standpoint. Urgency. So urgency is all about the feeling within the company of how important it is to make progress. So Blue Origin, we don't need to show a profit. And in fact, I've had a lot of people tell me that when they're talking about Blue Origin. You know, that Bezos puts in so much money, they'll automatically win because they don't need to show a profit. Okay. I don't think that's a great way to evaluate businesses, and I think it's false for a few reasons. Rocket Lab, pretty clearly, if they failed on Electron, they were pretty much out of business. And they were going to lose their jobs. Now, maybe they would have been able to pivot to something else, but probably not. So that was there because most people tell me that this is a huge advantage, that not having to show a profit is a huge advantage. And I've worked in a number of software companies, both big and large. And I can tell you the companies that were big and had lots of money and not much urgency generally did really crappy, and the ones that were small and had to watch their money and were kind of hungry just did much more interesting things. So another thing to look at here is kind of timelines. So Rocket Lab, founded in 2006, In 2017, they flew Electron the first time, so took them a while to figure out what they were going to do and get to their first launch. That's pretty typical in startup companies. 2018, they brought on Photon, and by 2019, they were launching 6 Electron missions a year. And I think they launched 6 in 2020 as well. And then 2021, they're on to their next thing. So we've established kind of this cadence of working on stuff. So the Blue Origin timeline, founded in 2000. 2015, first launch of New Shepard. Like Rocket Lab, took them a while to figure out what they were going to do. That same year, they announced New Glenn, announced that they would launch it in 2020. In 2016, they said New Shepard will fly crewed by end of year 2017. 2019, we had 3 New Shepard missions, and then that's kind of the peak of New Shepard. They have flown, they flew once in 2020, if I recall right. The idea of flying crew has essentially slipped year for year. It's always going to happen next year. And New Glenn, recently, kind of at the end of 2020, it slipped all the way to 2022. So what I see is a lot of activity, but no established cadence, no history of actually getting things done, kind of the way I'd say it. So, and finally, we're going to get to culture. And culture is the real thing I wanted to talk about the most when I talked about Blue Origin, because people misunderstand the role of culture, and they especially misunderstand the role of culture within startups and within companies that are trying to do new, big, hard things. So I kind of have a scenario we'll walk through here. So we start out with a founder, and our founder says, we build rockets, okay? And that's the vision that we start with for the company. And that's great, but clearly the founder cannot do this alone, so the founder hires a number of people. So now together, they all work together, and at this number of people, this size company, you generally don't have much structure. You have like a room or maybe a small building with some conference rooms, and people have titles, but it doesn't really matter very much, and everybody just kind of works together. And that's great. And they all have this goal. It's like we build rockets. Now, after a while, we hire more people and we grow, and that organization structure kind of doesn't work anymore. There's too many people, not enough focus, all sorts of things. And we need to do something different. Now, in the startup world, there are a number of different ways to do organization. And I'm really not going to talk about all of those. I've decided to show you a hierarchical way, which is kind of the traditional US business approach for organization. But it's not the only one you can use, and really not the one I'd suggest for startups. But anyway, what we do, we get to the point where we're growing, and what do? Well, we kind of organize, and we pick 3 people, and these 3 people are now going to be leads. And since this is rockets and it's a physical product, we're going to assign them to certain areas of the product. So we have a lead for avionics, we have a lead for structure, and we have a lead for propulsion. Okay? And all that works great. And the thing that's interesting about leads is leads are people who organize a group, but they actually still do the same work as the people that work for them. That is to contrast them with managers, where managers do a fundamentally different kind of work. So we have our leads, we have this organization into groups, that works fine, and we still are all focused on this one vision. We build rockets, okay? And because we all have that focus, it's very easy to have discussions. We may not agree on things, but we can at least have discussions. Is this going to make our rocket better? Are we going to get there faster? All of those sort of considerations, all sort of technical concerns. And then inevitably, our company keeps growing. And so now I'm only showing one lead. So we have a lead, and this lead now has a whole bunch of people reporting to them. And that's too many, so we need to do something about it. And so what do? Well, once again, we add a layer of hierarchy, and we add a manager layer. And in this case, I showed the manager coming from a lead, moving to manager. Now, you can talk to a lot of people who've worked at startups or companies in general and ask them whether leads make good managers. And you'll get very different opinions. Some leads make very good managers, and some leads really don't get the difference in the difference in role. So managers just fundamentally do different things than leads do. And once again, how you play around with your company organization can change that. Some managers are still pretty technical. Some managers are quite not technical. So we have managers. One of the problems with managers is, because of this, one of the problems with managers is actually finding people in your group that are willing to move up to manager. Because inherently that means less time doing the fun stuff that I was doing before. And if you can't find good managers in the company, then you need to go outside. And there's a really common temptation to hire a professional manager. And you can see it's a professional manager because this manager is wearing a power tie. And this is very problematic. And the reason why this is very problematic is, before we did this, everyone at the company kind of grew up in the culture, or they came in and they were kind of immersed in the culture of the people around them. And that culture was, we build rockets. But now we brought in a professional manager. And what is their vision? Well, their goal, I manage people and I manage the business. And they don't have a goal, we build rockets, because, well, they were working somewhere else, and the goal there was to do management. My career as management is, I think, a better way to say that. So professional managers are hoping to either move up to a higher management role in their company, or over time be able to move to a better management role in a different company. That's what being a manager is about. So we've brought in this professional manager, and now we have this disconnect in the culture. And unfortunately, what happens is we have this professional manager, and the same thing happens in another group. We need another manager, and guess who is one of the main people who will hire that new manager? Well, it's the existing manager you've just hired. So what happens is we tend to proliferate professional managers. And many of these professional managers have formal business training, and formal business training in the US is very specific on how you should do things. You should have rules, and you should have procedures. And you need to be orderly and have these rules and have these procedures, and that is the proper way to run a business. Unfortunately, it's not a good choice for a startup culture, because these rules and procedures are not conducive to being fast about we build rockets. You just don't make progress the same way you would. Now you have these rules and procedures. So what happens when you do this? Well, you have some of the people that are in your group making contribution towards your vision look at this, and they say, you know, this company doesn't give me the freedom that I used to give, that it used to give me. So now I'm going to go and look somewhere else. And the problem is not only that you're going to lose people, but the people you are going to lose are the people who can easily get jobs somewhere else. And those tend to be your most talented people. So what happens is you get rules and procedures, and over time you have people leaving. Okay? Now that's bad. They had institutional knowledge and they were your high performers. But then you bring new people in. Who is most influential about the kind of new people you bring in? Well, it's your managers, especially if you're hiring leads. So guess what? You hire people who are more comfortable in this new world. They're comfortable in this rules and procedures world rather than in this kind of get things done, we build rockets world. So basically, once we brought in these managers, we have shifted the entire culture towards a more rule and procedure based. And we've given them a new vision. And the real vision is we follow the rules. If you want to get ahead in this company now, you need to follow the rules, because that's how the managers view their role. Their role is to ensure that everyone is compliant with the rules. And it turns out that if you look across major corporations in the US, getting things done and being a high achiever is not what gets you promoted, especially when you're in management. Following the rules gets you promoted. So now we have this disconnect, and unfortunately up at the top we have this founder who thought we were in the business of building rockets. We have a bunch of people down below, the individual contributors, who also thought we were in the business of building rockets. And then we have this disconnect in the middle. And so this is a sort of cultural thing that I see very problematic for startups. And because of that, I want to look at who the people are in various roles and kind of try to figure out whether they are we build rocket people or whether they are follow the rules people. Now, this is kind of my own interpretation. I thought it would be interesting to share some other opinions on this. So here's one. Never ever hire an MBA. They will ruin your company. Okay. This is from Peter Thiel, entrepreneur and venture capitalist. Here's another. When MBAs come to us, we have to fundamentally retrain them. Nothing they learned will help them succeed at innovation. This is Scott Cook, founder of Intuit. And then finally, when it comes to success in business, an MBA degree is optional, but a GSD, which is only earned by getting stuff done, is required. And that's Christine Comerford, who's kind of a serial entrepreneur. So basically what all these people are saying is that the culture you want when you're doing something entrepreneurial, you're trying to do something new and big, does not mesh well with the traditional ideas of how a business should be run. So that kind of walks all the way through what I wanted to talk. Oh, no, wait, I'm not even close. Okay, so sorry about that. So I talked about trying to figure out what sort of company from the outside. Are they a build rockets company or are they follow a rules company? And I came across these two pictures. And these are both the same activity. This is groundbreaking. I think the Blue Origin one is Huntsville, Alabama, and I think that's where their engine facility is. And I think the right is obviously Rocket Lab, and I think this is at their New Zealand launch site. Which one of these do you think is more follow the rules, and which one of these do you think is more build rockets? Okay, and to me this is like very, very obvious. And this is one of the reasons why when we looked at the timeline, we see that Rocket Lab looks like they're actually pretty solid about building something and executing and actually doing business. And Blue Origin seemed to kind of ramp up, and now they're kind of not doing anything. I think that's one of the big things at root. So I need to go back and talk about leadership a little bit. And the reason why is I showed you this slide earlier and I actually lied. And the reason I lied is I implied that Jeff Bezos runs Blue Origin. But Jeff Bezos runs Amazon. And he's run Amazon the whole time that Blue Origin has existed. So he's not, you can call him the founder of Blue Origin, but he's really not leading or operating Blue Origin. Now, you can say Bezos has said that he's going to stop step down from Amazon in the near future, and he might transition, and he might go over to Blue Origin and spend a lot more time there. He has a lot of challenges just because of the cultural things that have happened there. So that's kind of what I think. He is not the leader there. I actually think that Blue Origin is actually what's sometimes called a hobby business or kind of a prestige business. It's not uncommon for rich executives to have this other business on the sideline that more aligns with kind of their hobbies or their things they like to do. So we'll see they'll own horse races, they'll own horses for horse racing, they might own a winery, they might own a race car team, all of those sorts of things are pretty common. I actually think Blue Origin is a hobby business for Bezos. And the reason it looks like a normal business is because he has so much more money than most people who do hobby businesses have. But yeah, I think it kind of meets the definition of a hobby business. And if you look at that, how it behaves and how it acts looks a little more explainable. So maybe that changes as he retires. Maybe it doesn't. Currently, for the past 4 or 5 years, Blue Origin has been run by Bob Smith. And I will say I did specifically look for a picture with a red tie, just because I'd shown the manager with a red tie before. And my purpose is really not to pick on Bob Smith. Bob Smith has a doctorate in aerospace engineering, and he's worked on a bunch of different things. He's worked on NASA projects. So he has the right sort of technical credentials. But unfortunately, he's worked in these big, what we would call old space sort of companies. And most recently, he worked as VP of Advanced Development in Honeywell Corporation. Now, I don't know a whole lot about the internals of Honeywell Corporation, but I'm going to expect that there's a lot of following the rules because that's what happens in big corporations. Something I didn't tell you earlier, Ernst & Young named Peter Beck the Entrepreneur of the Year for 2016. So if you're asking me which one of these two people is better at doing rockets, doing something challenging in rocketry, I'm going to choose Peter Beck. And finally, just a little summary slide. What do I think the high points are? So Rocket Lab has demonstrated expertise in orbital launch. They're just stepping up one level with Neutron. All the projects they're doing look like they're aligned with the company goal, or at least the projects they're talking about. They're run by an involved and experienced founder. Blue Origin, no experience in orbital launch, planning to jump from suborbital to heavy lift with New Glenn. Most projects are not aligned with the stated company goal, and they're run by an old space VP. Or I guess VP is the wrong term. They're run by an old space executive is probably a fairer term. So what do I think? Rocket Lab wins and Blue Origin loses. Rocket Lab has a track record of being successful, and I think they will likely be successful with Neutron. And by successful, I mean they will bring it to market and they will actually fly it, and they will fly it successfully. Will it be competitive, and how will it perform in the market? I really do not know. But I think they'll get to that point. Blue Origin, especially with New Glenn, I'm concerned. I think 2022, if you have slipped 2 years, it's pretty likely that you're going to slip another 2 years. And we haven't seen a lot out of their factory. They have a very beautiful new factory, and it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot going on inside of it. They do have a good engine. Apparently, BE4 is a good engine, at least according to ULA. But they have all of these different things they're trying to do, and a lot of them don't look like they're aligned. And I think it's kind of confusing. And I don't see that they have the kind of culture that will allow them to be quick and fast the way Rocket Lab will be. So that's my analysis. I hope you enjoyed it.